This next list, I think anyone would agree, is a really tough one. While some people, including myself, can easily point to movies that mean a lot to them, sometimes it's individual moments that really stick in your head. Even bad movies might occasionally have one scene that strikes you as legitimately good, maybe even ingenious, leaving you wondering where that talent was for the rest of the movie. But just for the record, there happen to be no movies like that on my list. They're all movies I already love. Anyway, to this day, I've seen over 2,300 movies, so trying to pick just 10 scenes to call my all-time favorites is no easy task. The top 2 on my list were pretty easy, they always spring out at me right away. I was inspired to make this list because Doug Walker, better known as the Nostalgia Critic, did a list of his favorite movie moments, and I ended up going with a couple of his picks because I couldn't help but agree. For the rest, I had to look through all my DVDs and think about my favorite scene from each movie. Basically what I'm saying is that this list will probably never be truly definitive. These are just a few examples that occur to me right now. I'm definitely satisfied with the list though, and I do think no matter what I see in the future, these picks will be really hard to top. So here we go. These are my top 10 favorite movie scenes. Number 10. The infiltration scenes from The Incredibles. This was one of the first instances I ever saw of characters being especially cunning and resourceful. There are 2 sequences in the film where a character is trying to sneak into Syndrome's lair without being seen. In Bob's case, I was on board from the moment he uses trees to break his fall while descending onto a moving train. The highlight of Helen's attempt is when she gets trapped in 3 doors at once, and the way she works around it and takes out the guards is brilliant. This is the standard to which I hold all smart heroes. Number 9. The detour discussion from Sunshine. The crew of the Icarus II has to reach a critical decision here. They picked up the distress beacon of the Icarus I, but aren't sure what kind of shape it's in or if its crew is still alive. The survival of all humankind rests on their decision, and the arguments from both sides are perfectly valid. Piloting the Icarus I might give them 2 chances instead of 1 to complete their all-important mission, but what if that turns out to be impossible? One line sums it up perfectly.
The question is, does the risk of a detour outweigh the benefits of an extra payload?
Number 8. How Would You Touch Me? From Her. This is Theodore and Samantha's first really intimate moment. Samantha starts comforting him, which soon becomes a hypothetical about how they'd share a moment if Samantha were a real person. While you might view it as disturbing that he's basically having phone sex with a machine, I view this as a beautiful moment of bonding, affinity, and understanding. Not to mention, after Theodore's horrible phone sex experience earlier in the film, he really needed one that was genuine and affectionate. What clinches it is how the screen goes completely blank as the scene progresses, leaving us to use our imagination just like the characters are. Number 7. The death traps from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This takes place during the film's climax, so I don't want to spoil too much. The plot, if you don't know, is that Indy and his rivals are searching for the Holy Grail. Once they've found its location, they still have to get past these brain-teasing death traps that form its last line of defense. I think I can speak for all of us when I say the first time I saw this, I had no idea what was coming, what to expect, or how Indy would get through each trial. The first one is especially nail-biting given what we've seen happens when you fail. Number 6. The Walk from Mary Poppins. Doug Walker took the words right out of my mouth on this one. When I saw this scene as a child, I didn't necessarily understand it, but I could still tell it was important. This is near the end of the movie when Mr. Banks is walking to the bank afraid he's going to be sacked. He's dedicated his whole life to this job, even more so than to his family, and now he's about to lose it. The atmosphere in this scene is perfect. The dark, empty streets and that amazing music, it all reflects the feeling of inevitability and self-reflection splendidly. Number 5. The Battle of Gondor from The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. I think it's pretty obvious why this is on the list. There's no shortage of fantastic action scenes in cinema that I could have picked from, but this really is one of the greats. Of course, the whole spectacle of it is staggering, but what I love most is how the tides keep turning over the course of the battle. At first, the bad guys seem unstoppable, then the good guys counter back magnificently, then the bad guys get their second wind. What's more, it doesn't happen so many times that it becomes tiresome. The pacing of the whole battle is just perfect. Number 4, the empty stadium from Rocky. While most people would point to the training montage, rightfully so, don't get me wrong, this is the moment that really sums up the movie for me. It's when Rocky first walks into the stadium where he'll be fighting Apollo, and it's so enormous that it makes him and us feel incredibly small. As he looks around the cavernous arena, he finally realizes exactly what he's getting into. As he says in the following scene, he realizes he can't win. But if he can at least make it to the end or go the distance, he'll have proved something to both the crowd and himself. Number 3, falling slowly from Once. This is another moment that kickstarts and defines the romance central to the film. Glenn Hansard and Marketa Irglova, whose characters are never named, decide to play together in a music shop. He starts to play one of his songs, which turns out to be, of course, Falling Slowly, and she starts to learn the chords and join in on the piano, so that soon they're in perfect harmony. I just can't argue with a couple bonding over music. The song itself deservedly won an Oscar, but that's beside the point. The way it's utilized in the film gives us something damn near magical. Number 2, the T-Rex breakout from Jurassic Park. This scene is just incredible. The Nostalgia Critic was absolutely right. It's about as perfectly paced and perfectly suspenseful as a scene can get. It's both exciting and terrifying at the same time. From the moment the T-Rex steps through the demolished fence, the low camera angle makes you feel suddenly very small and vulnerable, like you would not want to be out in the open with that beast. Not to mention, the characters' actions prior to this feel so real and relatable that you're in their shoes every step of the way. It's 10 glorious minutes of Steven Spielberg at the pinnacle of his talent. And my number 1 favorite scene of all time is the "Why are you changing your vote" argument from 12 Angry Men. I suppose it's only natural that my favorite movie of all time would also feature my favorite scene of all time. This, quite simply, is possibly the best verbal confrontation I've ever seen. The whole movie is chock full of compelling dialogue and quotable lines, but by far my favorite is when juror number 11 confronts number 7 about the reason he's decided to change his vote. 7's only doing it because at this point the jury is at a tie about whether or not the convicted boy is guilty, and he's sick of all the talking that's going nowhere. At this, number 11, who's been rather quiet and non-confrontational up to now, finally loses his temper because he's so appalled at the injustice in this way of thinking. As he says,
"Who tells you that you have the right to play like this with a man's life?"
I love this scene because I'm in complete agreement with number 11. When someone's fate is in your hands, you should always make your decision for the right reason and not be so callous about it. My absolute favorite part is this exchange.
"Guilty or not guilty?"
I told you. Not guilty.
"Why?"
I could hear that "why" a million times, it's performed so perfectly. Runners up, The Crawler and the Viewfinder from The Descent. This is one of the best executed jump scares I've ever come across, especially in how the music screams at the exact same time you do. The Basement from The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. This scene from the original 2009 Swedish version brings that scene from the book to life better than I ever could. The final face-off from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There's a reason this scene is so legendary. It's nothing short of an editing masterpiece for all future generations to learn from. Letting Your Loop Run from Looper. This scene from early in the film, after a character's future self escapes, is a horrifying example of how ripples in time can be exploited. The Bully's Beatdown from Love, Simon. This is when the bullies finally get their comeuppance. A teacher tells them off with a speech that every bully in the world needs to hear. And Maxim Telling All from Rebecca. I already mentioned this in the Hitchcock Top 10 list. I just love how you can picture the events in your head as the camera moves around the room to match his words.